So welcome everyone to What Makes a Good Presentation by Matthew Butler. In this workshop, Matt will be reviewing a series of tips and techniques to help you deliver a great presentation. Matt is a senior account executive with SkyWatch, where he helps to unleash the potential of satellite imagery for our customers. Now I'm going to pass it on to Matt.
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. I'm sure everyone is busy and working through your projects and your presentations and getting some great time with your mentors. So this is meant just to be a quick, 10, 15-minute session, as a good reference point for you all as you're working towards giving those presentations. Did this actually last year, and a lot of views on the YouTube page, and thought I'd do it again this year with a little bit of a slightly different focus, but a lot of the same principles for this cohort. So again, the topic is what makes a good presentation. So it's kind of a public speaking presentation, if you will. And I think the reason why I wanted to focus on this is that you're all going to be presenting your projects, or whether you're doing it this season or another season or later on in your life, you're going to be presenting a lot. And it's always good to be mindful of some of the good tips and techniques and principles out there to help guide you in perfecting and improving on your delivery. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. We're going to keep it nice and simple, positive vibes, and hopefully you'll be able to take something away from it for when you deliver your presentations and your projects. So with that, hopefully everyone can hear me, everyone can see my screen. Let's kind of jump into it here. All right. Yeah, so as I mentioned, what makes a good presentation? I put a quote there on the side. I'm actually a seasoned Toastmaster. I've been working and doing Toastmasters for many years. I have a background as a part-time performer, and just lots of scenarios I've been in my life where I've had to public speak. So I have a lot of passion for it, and that's why I wanted to make sure I did this workshop again this year. And if it helps you or with any of your projects, that's great. And I put that quote there on the right, that the art of communication is the language of leadership, because I think it's true that great leaders are often also great communicators. So many of you who are working with your mentors, who are diving into your projects, are aspiring, I think, to be leaders in your field or to be change agents in the industry. And having strong communication will be a good asset to you as you go forth into your career into this industry. So I want to kind of start with that quote as kind of a starting place. So why public speaking and presenting? So here's just some things I want to share. So communication, really, it's the bridge between confusion and clarity. The more effective you can communicate, the more clear you can be, the more likely people are to understand your themes, your ideas, what you're looking to solve for with your projects. And it will help you have a greater influence over achieving what you want to achieve. And it's how you get your big idea understood and adopted. It's how you affect change. So it's important. Before I jump into some basics, some of that will be common sense, but I think it's nice to be mindful of it, and it doesn't hurt to kind of brush up and refine your knowledge and understanding of presenting. But I want to talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect. So it's interesting. A lot of people I've talked to who feel like they're confident speakers or they're good presenters. Maybe they've had a natural flair for it in school. Maybe it's something they've never really been overly afraid of doing, which I think is probably rare. Even the most seasoned speakers get anxiety and get a little stressed before a presentation. But regardless, if this is something that's always been one of your strong suits, it's important to remember that you can always get better and refine your skills. And that's kind of what this Dunning-Kruger effect speaks to. It's that people who brand themselves or have estimated themselves as a presenter person or something that they enjoy doing. And that sometimes can lead to them not fully refining or improving upon their base level. So I guess the takeaway there is that even the greatest speakers can still always improve. So it's always worthwhile to take a look at and be intentional about your approach, especially before giving a presentation for your project. So some basics. Some things, and this is coming right from kind of the Toastmasters literature, so my world. Obviously, know your material and the projects you're working on. You have an advantage there because obviously it's material you've been working with. You probably know it very well, but obviously know your stuff. Practice does make perfect. I know it's a tried and true and kind of obvious thing to say, but it really does make a difference. Practicing what you're going to say how you're going to deliver it with your content ahead of time makes a world of difference, not only for your confidence level, your anxiety level, but also just for your precision and your ability to get what you want to get across. Know the audience and know the room. So two separate things. Know the audience is so you can tailor how you're delivering your project and your presentation. So you have you amplify and maximize the impact. And knowing the room, and I guess in the case of virtual, knowing the application is really just getting comfortable with the medium and the platform and the area in which you'll actually be presenting, so you don't get tripped up the day of. I remember many students who do speech competitions, they tend to go out to the area where they're actually going to be delivering the speech, so they get a feel for the room, the layout. It helps to make them feel more grounded and calmer when before they're about to deliver. So in this case, what that could look like is stepping into Zoom ahead of time, stepping into Google Meet ahead of time, making sure that your technology and your lighting and your microphone and everything else that you'll be doing for remote project presentation is good to go. Another thing I think is just relax. I think public speaking is one of those things, or giving a presentation, one of those things that's just naturally anxiety inducing. And the more you can relax ahead of time, the better you'll do. The less nerves you have, the more likely you'll be able to stay on focus and stay on the mark, and making sure you're not wandering and you're being as influential and as precise as you want to be. So I think just relaxing is good, and everyone has different techniques and coping mechanisms to help do that. But whatever yours are, I would definitely lean into those. Probably the same, like at least the day before or a couple hours before, so you're in a good place. Visualizing success is really important. Actually visualizing yourself giving the presentation, delivering your project, even maybe visualizing a good adjudication or a good reception of it is probably a very useful thing for you to do. It just helps to connect your mind, body, and spirit into a successful mode of execution. Assuming positive intent for the audience, for the people. They want you to succeed. Very rarely you have people wanting to tear you down or hoping you'll fail. They're wanting to listen to you because they want you to succeed. They want to learn from you. They want to see what you've been working on, and they like seeing other people's success. So just remember that you're in a safe space, pun intended, because this is a space apps community. But I think that's an important thing to call out. And then the last two things: concentrate on the message. Just don't wander too much with extraneous detail. Don't get tripped up. If something does happen where you make a mistake or something goes wrong, I would just say breathe into that and continue on and focus on what the key message is, or what is the big theme or themes that you want to get across. So I would say coming back to that, like what is ultimately the big thing you want them to take away from this? What is the one thing you want them to remember? If things are maybe going sideways, or you're having a couple rough moments, which happens to all of us, even the most seasoned speakers, always coming back to concentrating on what is the main takeaway is a safe place and a smart way to maybe come back if you falter. And then last thing is gaining experience. So I think there's a famous kind of example of the people who interview the best for jobs, take interviews all the time and practice interviewing. Same ways here. The more opportunities you give yourself and to present and to deliver a speech or a presentation, the more likely you are to get better. So putting yourselves and giving yourself exposure and gaining experience is really going to serve you well. And this is a good example of that, because you're all going to be in a situation now where you're going to have to present or at least communicate some ideas, and that's going to be useful for you. So those are some basics. Probably a lot of things are fairly straightforward, but I think it's just good to conceptualize and to be mindful of as you go into the next few days of this Space Apps challenge. All right, so I'm going to shift here and I wanted to raise this slide. And sorry, it's a little grainy, but Maya Angelou, she has this famous quote, right? I'm sure you've heard it. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And some of you might be wondering, like, how does this apply? We're at a Space Apps challenge. We're talking about technical stuff. Why does this matter? And I think it goes a long way to illustrating that part of presenting is also just reading the room, connecting with your vibe and the audience's vibe, and making sure that you imbue your presentation with empathy and a certain amount of tailoring that you want to make sure that it's resonating with them on an emotional level, if possible. Not always easy to do, but something worth being mindful of, because the literature shows, and the wisdom states that if you can connect with your audience emotionally, get them bought in, you're likely to have it be more resonant. So it's just a good takeaway, good reminder. And famous quote, right? So I'm going to cover a few basic principles, not just a bit more extra beyond some of the basics. So first thing is economy. It's huge, both from a writing standpoint, but also a public speaking, presenting standpoint. You want to speak with economy. So what does that mean? Clarity, simplicity, focus, trying to make sure you're being precise with what you're saying, how you're saying it. Less is more oftentimes. I'm sure you've heard the expression death by PowerPoint. I think it's important to really focus on what the key messages are, the key points are, without too much extraneous elements. I think simplicity and clarity goes a long way, and it really it's coalesced with that principle of economy. And speak confidently and concisely. I think that's sometimes a forgotten virtue with speaking. I think sometimes people think they have to fill time and they need to speak more, and detail is important. But I think that there's a room for overkill if you're not paying attention to being more concise. Leave them wanting more doesn't hurt you either. Principle 2, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this expression, and I did cover it last year if you did see that presentation. Pictures, as humans, we resonate with pictures. That's a big testament to why Instagram is so popular. And having a presentation with some compelling imagery or photos or whatever it is will go a long way to get people to be emotionally bought in, to remember your presentation, and also just to make your job easier, because they're going to get your point just from looking at the picture as you're speaking around it. So very worthwhile to remember. Seems straightforward, but you'd be surprised how many people leave this out or don't exercise or optimize against this. So there's an element of pictorial superiority, like people like pictures. And then, so complement your text on slides with photos, videos, images. I think that's pretty clear. And this image here is a very famous photo that Ellen took with a whole bunch of celebrities. I think maybe 6, 7, I can't remember exactly, a number of years ago at the Academy Awards. It was a very famous selfie. Some say even like the first big celebrity selfie. Very trivial for our purposes from a space apps perspective, but an example of a picture that many people remember, and definitely had 1,000 words attached to it. All right. Principle number 3, this is really critical. And this is where my inner kind of Toastmasters is really coming out here. Making sure that you're delivering your speech or your presentation with some vocal variety and diversity. So not speaking in a monotone way, using inflection, being aware of your tone and your pacing, your volume, and using that to your ability to place emphasis where emphasis needs to be placed and to pull back where maybe it doesn't need it as much. And having that diversity will not only make for a better listen and keep your audience engaged, but it also will just be more dynamic. So I made a graph up there: pitch, projection, voice quality, resonance, breath support, inflection, nonverbal aspects of communication. I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you have on any of these, if you want any specific examples, but these are things you definitely want to keep in mind. Effective persuaders modulate their voice, and by doing so appear to be more confident in their argument or their presentation. So raise your voice when you're emphasizing a key message, or they pause after delivering an important point. That's another key point here. Pause. Dead space during a presentation sometimes feels like death to the presenter, but can be very effective for your audience, to give them a second to actually absorb what you just said or the point you just made, and also to not have you go through that period of transition where you're filling it with all those filler words and getting a little flustered. Pausing, staying calm, breathing into it, connecting with your audience is definitely something that's going to help you. And just don't underestimate the power of your voice to make a positive impression on your audience. It's a very important part of presenting well and public speaking in general. And it's something that you can get better with if you haven't had a lot of time to experiment with any of these differences. All right, happy to answer any questions on this. There's actually a lot of literature around this principle. Happy to get into more detail with you, but I would just think a good takeaway from this slide, I would say, is try and have some variety in your presentation insofar as how you're speaking about a topic. And I'll leave it there for now. Principle 4, so wow moments. So a good presentation, a good speech, an effective communicator, certainly if they're giving some of our longer or more long form project speech or presentation, you're gonna want a wow moment, something that's really special, something that really goes the extra mile, something that really hooks your audience in, something different. This really, there's lots of ways you can approach this kind of principle, but it's really just an unexpected moment that really just grabs your audience and gets them to not be bored and gets them really hooked into what you're saying and talking about. So it encourages active listening, it reinforces engagement, all those good things. So an example of that would be, I have a video here, actually, a very famous video that Jerry Seinfeld from that show that talks about public speaking. Actually, it's from one of his stand-up specials, I think. So I'm actually going to go ahead and play that right now as my kind of intra-presentational wow moment and bring that up here.
Hey, I'm Talon.
Perfect. And I'm hoping everyone can hear and see this. I'm going to go play this.
I saw a thing, actually, a study that said speaking in front of a crowd is considered the #1 fear of the average person. I found that amazing. Number 2 was death. Death is number 2? This means to the average person, if you have to be at a funeral, you would rather be in the casket than doing the eulogy.
Yeah, so some of you might have seen that before. Again, that's Jerry Seinfeld, but just a kind of serves two purposes. One, it's true that public speaking and presenting in a public scenario is a big fear of most people. And two, it's kind of a wow moment in this presentation. I'm stopping to play a video, something a little bit funny, but still connects back to some of the message. So try and take that principle away with your projects, your presentations, and try and find a wow moment if you can. Principle 5, rehearse. So again, straightforward, but very important. And I wanted to touch on this again, in addition to just the basic point I made earlier, that deliberate practice makes presentations perfect. So I'm actually, as Mihak was saying, I'm a senior account executive at SkyWatch. So I work in business development and sales. And in sales, we do a lot of role playing. That's an example of deliberate practice, right? Role playing with colleagues before getting in front of clients, same kind of thing. Putting yourself in a simulated scenario where you feel the real emotions that you're going to feel and deliver under those conditions, I think is probably the best way to describe it. It just putting that time in to make your presentation great does make a difference. For example, and this is a stat here I have the bottom left. So Martin Luther King Jr., obviously a very influential civil rights figure and activist. He was known to be a brilliant speaker and orator. And it's said that he'd given like 2,500 speeches in his lifetime. So by the time later in his life where he was doing a lot more speeches and had a much bigger name, he had already done tons and tons of speeches. So had a lot of practice. Kind of connects to that Malcolm Gladwell principle of 10,000 hours. Obviously, the more you specialize and do something, the better you get. And same way here. And I think the key difference here is, as opposed to just going through your notes before, making sure your slides look right, is really being intentional about how you rehearse and how you practice. Like actually giving the presentation to a trusted family member or colleague or friend. Try recording yourself to listen to it back, to see how it goes and to try and see where you can find improvements. Really doing that deliberate, intentional practice and rehearsal, I think, is the key difference beside the obvious things of making sure your PowerPoint looks good and making sure you have a sense of the order of what you're going to talk about also the delivery of that as well. And that could also include practicing with some of the different vocal delivery techniques like inflection, tone, and so on. I would highly recommend that. And the last thing I wanted to close on is this is something that a lot of people might have seen already, but it basically it's a breakdown based on some research done around what is most resonant in terms of personal communication? What do people mostly notice? And what tends to be the breakdown of what's most critical when communicating? So obviously 7% spoken words. So, obviously you want your ideas and you want clarity and you want that vocal variety. We talked about that's key, but you'll see 38% is voice and tone. So we did cover that. But 55% is body language. We haven't really talked too much about that. So whether you're in person or whether you're on camera, some good advice there is also be aware of your body, standing up straight, having an open perspective, with your hands, making the occasional gesture, making sure that you are connected and you're listening to what your audience feedback level is, what you're actually saying and how it's connecting, occasionally making eye contact, and just being aware that your body language, probably a little bit less remotely, but still important. But in general, your body language and your tone and voice delivery are almost, as you can see, a lot more critical than what actually you're sometimes saying. So that's the key point here is what you actually say is important, but how you're saying it and how your body looks while you're saying it is critical. So definitely you can incorporate this into your rehearsal process. And with that, that's my presentation on public speaking and presenting. Available for any questions, whether that happens later on the chat or on the comments, or if you want to message me directly, my email is matt@skywatch.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Matthew Butler. I'm happy to answer any questions, give you any advice around how you can get into Toastmasters or improve your public speaking or presentation skills. Hope this was helpful. Tried to keep it simple and straightforward, and good luck with all your projects as we close out Space Apps, the Space Apps Challenge. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Matt. We really appreciate all of your help in hosting this workshop and throughout Space Apps for the past few years. And this recording will be available and sent on Slack. So if anyone wants to go ahead and give that a look later, feel free to do so. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.